If you couldn't tell from this channel, Disneyland means a lot to me. And today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to take the lands of Disneyland and rank them up. So Disneyland has a total of 9 lands at the moment, but right away we're going to disqualify Main Street because it is an entrance area. And as good as it is, it just doesn't compare to the other ones. Like if I did a video ranking entrance areas, Main Street would probably be at the top of the list, but it's just not on the same level as all of the other lands. Like really the only rides that it has are the Main Street vehicles, which are barely a ride. That's pretty much just a mode of transportation. And the other one is the train that you go under to enter the park. And that has stations in 3 other lands, so it's debatable if that attraction even belongs to Main Street, but I'm gonna disqualify it along with Main Street. So I've spent a lot of time at Disneyland, so I know all of these lands like the back of my hand. So we're gonna look at every area of this park and compare it by 6 different categories. And of course, we're going to go through some miscellaneous notes that apply to each and every land. One of the most important aspects of any land are the attractions, and we're going to divide attractions into 2 categories, one being headlining attractions and the second being supporting attractions. So we're just going to run through the headlining attractions real quick. In Tomorrowland, we have Space Mountain and Star Tours. In Fantasyland, we have Matterhorn bobsleds. In Toontown, we have Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. In Frontierland, we have Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. In Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, we have Rise of the Resistance and Smuggler's Run. In Bayou Country, we have Tiana's Bayou Adventure. In New Orleans Square, we have Haunted Mansion and the Pirates of the Caribbean. And for Adventureland, we have Indiana Jones Adventure. So let's get things started with number 8. I actually just made a video talking about this land. It is Tomorrowland, which is one of the originals at Disneyland. So as we just discussed, the headlining attractions in Tomorrowland are Star Tours and Space Mountain. And out of the headlining attractions, those rank 3rd. In terms of supporting attractions, we have Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, the Astro Orbiter, Autopia, Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage, and of course, the monorail. That is a decent quantity of attractions for the supporting lineup, and it has some decent quality with Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters. So in my opinion, Tomorrowland has the best supporting attraction lineup, which means they rank number 1. In terms of food, Tomorrowland has 2 major restaurant locations, being Alien Pizza Planet and Galactic Grill. As I mentioned in my review video for Tomorrowland, Galactic Grill is my least favorite restaurant at the entire resort, so that does drag it down a decent bit. Alien Pizza Planet isn't bad, and it definitely helps that I'm nostalgic for Toy Story. The food of Tomorrowland ranks 5 out of 8. In terms of theming, Tomorrowland might be one of the least immersive lands at Disneyland Park. It is just a lot of jumbled attractions together, like there isn't consistency through the entire land. For example, the Pixar attractions, being Buzz Lightyear and Nemo, don't really work well with some of the original attractions like the monorail. And then you throw in space travel attractions like Space Mountain, which does have a Star Wars overlay that ties in to Star Tours, which is right next door. And of course the gift shop is themed to Star Wars, so it's just a whole bunch of IPs, and the architecture of a lot of the buildings doesn't work well together, so Tomorrowland might be one of the least coherent lands. So for that reason, theming is number 8. Very similar to theming is atmosphere. I feel like these 2 categories go hand in hand, but they aren't the same thing at all. Like, in terms of energy, there's a lot of abandoned spaces in Tomorrowland, which I feel like really drags down the vibe of the area. Like, it's literally covered in the People Mover track, so it's just a constant reminder that Tomorrowland is not complete, it's not fulfilled, it's not what it should be, and that really drags down the energy of the land in my opinion. And of course you have the Innoventions building, which is basically just being used for a Star Wars meet and greet, so it feels like wasted space. You also have the Tomorrowland Theater, which takes up a good chunk of land, and it's just not engaging. Like, there's just nothing going on over there. The entrance to Space Mountain is pretty hollow. Like, it kind of feels like an empty courtyard, you know? So I'm not a big fan of the atmosphere of Tomorrowland, which is why it also ranks number 8. And the last category that we're going to look at is kind of a bonus category for all of these lands. It is the firework view. Tomorrowland ranks 6th because it is pretty close to the front of the park. It's pretty close to Main Street. It literally borders Main Street. But because of Buzz Lightyear and the Matterhorn, most of the land is blocked from seeing the fireworks. But if you head over by closer to Space Mountain, like especially if you're on the 2nd level of the Space Mountain complex, then you can have some decent views of the fireworks. They did have like a a special dining experience where you could go up to the second level of the Interventions building to watch the fireworks. I did do that one time, so that was kind of cool, but that's like a one and done thing. That's not like something that you have to do, you know. It's just cute if you have extra time. So for that reason, the firework view of Tomorrowland ranks 6 out of 8. So overall, Tomorrowland is lacking kinetic energy in the heart of the land. Galactic Grill is probably one of my least favorite restaurants in the entire park. I'm not a fan of how the IPs clash with the original Disneyland attractions. And on top of all that, the walkway between the Nemo Lagoon and the Matterhorn is a pretty nasty bottleneck. So overall, Tomorrowland is a total mixed bag, and unfortunately, one land did have to rank last. And because this park is just absolutely stacked, unfortunately, Tomorrowland does come in last. This is absolutely a very interesting land, like it's totally worth discussing, which is why I made that full separate review video, which you should definitely check out if you haven't already. So we're gonna move on to number 7, which is Bayou Country. So of course this is like the newest land, newest quote unquote. It's the Disney does refurbish their land sometimes, and of course this is the newest land to get a retool or refresh. It used to be Critter Country, and with the opening of Tiana's Bayou Adventure, the whole land is now called Bayou Country. So in terms of headlining attractions, Bayou Country has Tiana's Bayou Adventure, as I just mentioned. I have a lot of thoughts on this attraction. Splash Mountain was my favorite attraction in the entire resort, and Tiana's Bayou Adventure is like my 10th or 11th favorite in the resort now, so it just does not reach the heights of the original attraction. And for that reason, out of all the headlining attractions in all of the land, Tiana's Bayou Adventure ranks 8 out of 8. It is the lowest ranked headlining land. In terms of supporting attractions, we have the Davy Crockett Explorer Canoes on the Rivers of America, and we also have the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which is a really cute dark ride. So those two are very different experiences, and for that reason, the supporting attractions rank 4 out of 8. That's a decent collection, a decent pair. Moving on to food, Bayou Country has Hungry Bear, Country Bear Jamboree, which is a pretty cute restaurant. I mean, the old Hungry Bear menu used to be in the same quality as like Galactic Grill, so the new barbecue that they brought really boosted the quality. They also boosted the prices, as you might guess, so I have not tried the entire menu, but from what I have had so far, the food at the refurbished restaurant is really, really good. But because there is a lack of food, the restaurants in Bayou Country rank 4 out of 8. If you haven't noticed already, Bayou Country is by far the smallest land that we're going to talk about in this video. Like, it's basically just that alleyway right next to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. So for that reason, there isn't that much room for theming, but what is there is pretty cute. Obviously, the Winnie the Pooh corner is really well done. It's very charming. But a lot of Splash Mountain rock work absolutely dominates this area of the park, and for the transformation to Tiana's Bayou Adventure, they didn't do enough work to get rid of all the Splash Mountain rock work, so it all looks very similar to what was there before. So in my opinion, that really is off-putting. And what they did change wasn't the most detailed. Like, a lot of Tiana's Bayou Adventure is just like dyed green rock from what was there originally, so it's absolutely not the best. Theming of Bayou Country ranks 7 out of 8. In terms of atmosphere, I do like the jazz music playing in the queue for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. That is really nice. However, the idea of Bayou Country and Winnie the Pooh does not mesh well at all. I talked about this in my review for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Like, I have no idea why they ditched the Critter Country theme when it feels like this iteration of the land has 3 generations of Critter Country coexisting. So I feel like the identity of this land is kind of in flux right now because Winnie the Pooh does not fit in the bayou at all. And for that reason, the inconsistency in the land really drags down the atmosphere to 7 out of 8. Absolutely not my favorite. I do love the position along the Rivers of America, though. We're gonna have to have this discussion about a lot of lands, but like, Rivers of America is technically part of Frontierland, but it almost feels like the river is like its own thing, and obviously it's not a land, it's a river, so it's not included in this list. But I absolutely love the Rivers of America. Like, it provides like a total vibe. Like, the kinetic energy of the river traffic benefits Bayou Country. Like, I love watching the Mark Twain, the sailing ship Columbia, obviously the canoes, the rafts. Like, there's just so much going on the river, and Bayou Country does benefit from that. And in terms of kinetic energy, you also have the logs for Tiana's Bayou Adventure, like constantly cycling. You can hear people scream going down the drop for like over and over and over again, so that's really fun. That brings energy to and life to this corner of the park, which I really enjoy. But because this is the smallest land in the park, it is kind of lacking character of its own. But I will say that the firework view is pretty good because you're pretty close to the firework launch point. One time I got to ride Splash Mountain and I went down the drop and I got to see some fireworks go off like at the exact same time. So that was really cool. So it does have a decent view, but it is kind of blocked by some of the trees, so it's not the best. But again, this is a total bonus category. So we're going to move on to number 6, which is Fantasyland. So if, in case you didn't know, Fantasyland was Walt Disney's favorite land. And as you can tell from this ranking, it is not my favorite. I do not consider myself a Fantasyland person at all. What I do consider myself to be is a Matterhorn person, though. I absolutely love Matterhorn bobsleds. It's one of my favorite attractions in the entire resort. I made a ranking video if you're curious to know the exact details of where it ranks, and especially for other attractions, including Tiana's Bayou Adventure and Space Mountain and Star Tours. But because I have a personal soft spot for the headlining attraction at Fantasyland, it does rank 4 out of 8. It isn't higher because the lands above it have more than one headliner, and in my opinion Fantasyland only has the one. But because I only think it has one headlining attraction, Fantasyland has by far the most supporting attraction. So we're gonna run through this collection real quick. So of course you have the classic dark rides with Pinocchio's Daring Journey, Snow White's Enchanted Wish, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, Peter Pan's Flight, and Alice in Wonderland. You also have King Arthur Carousel, Casey Jr. Circus Train, Dumbo the Flying Elephant, the Mad Tea Party, Storybook Land Canal Boats, and of course Small World. So that is an insane collection of supporting attractions. There's so much going on in Fantasyland. There's lots of kinetic energy with the teacups, the carousel, Dumbo, the canal boats, Casey Jr. Circus Train. Even Alice in Wonderland has like an outdoor section, so there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of excitement, and this collection puts Fantasyland at second place for supporting attractions. In terms of food, it is pretty generic. The main standout restaurant is the Red Rose Tavern, which is cute, it's pretty well themed, but in terms of quality of food, it's just kind of mid. The bottom half of restaurants in this video definitely are just like generic theme park food, and I feel like Red Rose Tavern is like the perfect example of this. They do serve gray stuff, which is like directly from Beauty and the Beast, so that's pretty cute. It tastes alright. They have a ton of different variations like for all the holiday seasons, but it is a pretty cute snack. They also have like this pretzel garlic cheese bread thing, and it is pretty good. A lot of my friends are like obsessed with it. In terms of theming, I rank Fantasyland at number 6 out of 8. So this land is absolutely incredibly charming. It's very, very, very cute. But that's not really my thing. As I said when I introduced this land, I am not a Fantasyland person, and I'm sure a lot of you listening to this video are Fantasyland people, so you might be completely offended right now. Like the village aesthetic in the castle area is very nice. It's very cute. It works pretty well. And then the Small World Mall, which is basically like the second half of the land, is also really cute. But it almost feels like it's two completely different lands. So in terms of atmosphere, there is that separation. But I do like the Small World music, which I know a lot of people don't. A lot of people, that's like the bane of their existence. But what really carries Fantasyland in terms of atmosphere is the area behind the castle, with the 5 classic dark rides and Dumbo, the carousel, Casey Jr., and the canal boats. Like, it's just pleasant to be in there. It's a total vibe. A lot of that is thanks to the great kinetic energy just because of the sheer amount of attractions. I could absolutely see why Fantasyland would rank higher for someone, but I don't, as I said, I don't consider myself a Fantasyland person. I'm not as big of a fan of the classic dark rides as some other people are. As mentioned, this is absolutely Walt Disney's land, so I'm not trying to disrespect it, but this land is just not for me. That's kind of the bottom line. Plus, there are always so many strollers in Fantasyland that it's like impossible to get around sometimes. Like, that's just kind of the nature of Fantasyland. Like, it's just gonna draw a younger audience, and because of that, there's gonna be strollers everywhere. Like, you can't walk 5 feet in Fantasyland without bumping into a stroller somewhere. But before we move on, we're gonna talk about the bonus category, which is the firework view, which I ranked at number 1 because it is really, really close to the fireworks. If you watch the show by Small World, they'll have projections on that facade, so that's really well done. And when you're up by Small World, you're like really, really close to the launch point for the fireworks, so you can feel it like in your chest. You can feel the that explosion and the vibration. It's just insane. But we're gonna move on to number 5, which is Frontierland. So in terms of headlining attractions, you have Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which is a really fun Disney coaster. In my opinion, it would rank Frontierland at 7 out of 8. I would take Big Thunder Mountain over Tiana's Bayou Adventure, in my opinion. In terms of supporting attractions, you really don't have that much. Really, it's just the Mark Twain and the sailing ship Columbia, which are on the river. And once again, the river, I'm considering it like its own thing, but because the dock for Mark Twain and the Columbia is in Frontierland, then Frontierland gets credit for the 2 big boats on the river. In terms of food, you have the Stage Door Cafe, the Golden Horseshoe, and the restaurant that is absolutely carrying this land, Rancho del Zocalo. I love Rancho del Zocalo. It's probably one of my favorite restaurants in the entire park, so that carries Frontierland's food ranking to number 3 out of 8. Apparently, Rancho del Zocalo is also where Doritos were invented, so that's really cool. I love that piece of trivia. In terms of theming, there's a lot of areas to discuss with Frontierland, because the entrance that connects to Main Street USA is pretty like cabin themed. It's pretty wooded. I mean, it's just pleasant to be around, and that leads you to the Mark Twain dock. The Rivers of America, on paper, once again, they're technically part of Frontierland, and that's like one of the most beautiful areas of the Disneyland Resort. So I feel like even though I'm considering the Rivers of America its own separate thing, the fact that Frontierland borders the river, just like Bayou Country, it gets extra points for that. Like, that definitely contributes to the beauty of the land. The back half of the land is basically just Big Thunder Mountain. Like, the walkway back there is all Big Thunder Mountain rock work, so it does look really nice. It's really well done, and those are the entrances to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which we will talk about later. So overall, theming is very well done for Frontierland, and it ranks 4 out of 8. Very similarly, atmosphere ranks 3 out of 8. The river traffic and the Big Thunder Mountain mine cars really contribute kinetic energy to the land, and it's just pleasant to be in. I really appreciate the area loop music. It's just a total vibe. During the day, they'll have the Disneyland band come out and play in front of the Golden Horseshoe, so there's just a good energy in Frontierland that I really, really enjoy. It can be one of the more peaceful lands when it's less crowded. For firework view, I ranked Frontierland 5 out of 8. I love doing firework rides on Big Thunder Mountain. That's an awesome experience. One more thing about Frontierland before we move on is that I think it gets bonus points for the really well-themed gift shops and the shooting gallery. The shooting gallery is a lot of fun. Moving up to number 4, this land shot up my rankings very recently. It is Toontown. Toontown used to be by far my least favorite land at Disneyland, and when Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway opened in 2023, they like completely refurbished the entire land, and now it looks really nice. It's very well done. For a headlining attraction, of course, you have Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, which is one of my favorites in the park, so that ranks 5 out of 8. It's an incredible dark ride. It's one of my favorites of all time, honestly. And in terms of supporting attractions, you have Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin and Chip 'n Dale's Go Coaster, both of which are very cute supporting attractions, which also ranks 5 out of 8. In terms of food, really isn't that much offered at Toontown. I actually tried the food for the first time just for this video, and it wasn't that great. Their main restaurant is called Cafe Daisy, and it just serves picnic food, which is like appropriate because like most of the land is themed to like a park or like a picnic yard. And obviously for Runaway Railway, the film that you're going to see is literally called Perfect Picnic, so I appreciate the theming. But in terms of quality of food, they have hot dogs and they have like pizza rolls, and the pizza was basically just the exact same that they serve at Red Rose Tavern, and as I said, that food is just okay, so not the best quality at all. But this area is very cute. Like, if you have to give the title of a kid's land to one land at Disneyland, that absolutely is Toontown. Like, Toontown is absolutely the most kid-friendly area. It has like a play structure, it has the meet and greets for Mickey and Minnie, and it has the park's kiddie coaster with Gadget Go Coaster. But it does have like a nice berm. Like, the Runaway Railway show building is very well disguised, and it's basically the backdrop for the entire land. And there's just so much more color than there used to be. I absolutely love that new water fountain that they added with Mickey and Minnie, and like the dancing fountains. It's really cute. So overall, theming ranks 5 out of 8 for Toontown. And as I said, they just breathe new life into this area, so the energy is absolutely there. I love the music, the area music for Toontown. It's very cute. You got the DuckTales theme playing sometimes, so what can you not love about the atmosphere of Toontown? I ranked it 4 out of 8, and Firework View is 8 out of 8 because Toontown is closed for the fireworks, which is probably a good thing. But just to summarize, Disney absolutely fixed this land in 2023. It used to be my least favorite by far. Now there's actual life back there. The play areas and the roller coaster create a good energy, plus I love the new water fountain. So I love Toontown. I spend way more time back there than I used to. But now we're really getting into the good stuff, because with number 3 we have Adventureland. So the headlining attraction of Adventureland is of course Indiana Jones Adventure, which is one of the greatest dark rides of all time. But unfortunately it only ranks 6 out of 8. But I would completely understand the argument to rank it higher. I absolutely love Indiana Jones. In terms of supporting attractions, you have Jungle Cruise, which is another Disney classic. I do wish that the skippers would go off script more. It feels like they used to do that pretty frequently, and these days I feel like Disney is keeping a tighter leash on them, so a lot of the ride experiences that you'll get on Jungle Cruise are pretty formulaic. Like, I wish that they would give them more freedom to put their own spin on the attraction, because the skipper absolutely carries your experience on Jungle Cruise. But moving on to food in Adventureland, the main restaurant is called Bengal Barbecue, and it's one of my favorites in the entire park. It's really, really good food. Unfortunately, the portion sizes are pretty small, and it is really, really overpriced, but it is some awesome food. Like, I absolutely love it. If you're just craving a snack and you're willing to pay the price, I absolutely recommend Bengal Barbecue. Those beef skewers are just delicious. Like, I love them. And they do have like a piece of bread that you can get with it, and that is obviously filling. So just off of the back of Bengal Barbecue, Adventureland food ranks 2 out of 8. And in terms of theming, this land is very, very detailed. Like, it's kind of ridiculous how much detail there is. Like, Adventureland really isn't that big. It's one of my favorite areas to spend time in, because it looks so well done. Like, it really feels like it transports you to a different time period, a different location, almost more than any other land in the park. Like, it's very, very detailed. Out of the original lands, Adventureland is absolutely my favorite. So theming ranks 3 out of 8. And in terms of atmosphere, it's hard to find a land that does atmosphere better than Adventureland. Like, the tiki sounds, you have the torches by the Adventureland sign. It's very well done. Of course, all the detail from the theming is great. There's so much landscaping. A lot of the older trees just absolutely tower over the land, so it feels like you're really immersed. And as I said, I absolutely love spending time in Adventureland. This is easily one of my favorite theme park lands of all time. So atmosphere ranks 2 out of 8. In terms of firework view, it's pretty blocked off by all those tall trees, so it is 7 out of 8, but that doesn't really matter. To summarize Adventureland, it just has a fantastic energy. The landscaping and weathering of the land is beautiful. It's very well done. Although this is one of the smaller lands, it absolutely has its own identity. And of course, I have to give big bonus points for the Adventureland Treehouse and the Enchanted Tiki Room. Those are both awesome, especially the Adventureland Treehouse that just opened pretty recently, and it's very, very well done. I love the Adventureland Treehouse. It gives you great views of the park, the rivers of America, and the Enchanted Tiki Room is a Walt Disney classic. What is not to love? Of course, you have Dole Whips, which I totally forgot to mention in the food section. Dole Whips and the Tiki Room go like hand in hand. Dole Whips are like one of the most iconic Disney snacks, so everyone loves it, including me. You have to get a Dole Whip when you go to Disneyland at some point. The major downside of Adventureland is, aside from the size of it, is that it is kind of one of the worst bottlenecks in the park. Like, that walkway between Main Street and Jungle Cruise is pretty tight sometimes, especially after Fantasmic. But I love the torches and the music, plus the insane detail, which combines for such a high atmosphere ranking. This might be my favorite land just to hang out in. Like, if I have to go to Disneyland and I'm challenging myself to not ride a ride, or if it's just too crowded to ride a ride, you could find me hanging out in Adventureland. I just wish there was more of it, to be honest, you know? It's absolutely one of my favorites. This might be a bit of a controversial take, but at number 2, we have Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So in terms of headlining attractions, you have Rise of the Resistance, and of course Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. I consider both of them high-profile e-tickets, so they're both headlining attractions at Disneyland Park. Because both attractions are headliners, that means there are 0 supporting attractions in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, so it is tied last. And in terms of food, this might be another hot take, but I'm really not a fan of the Star Wars food at all. Like, any of the restaurants, I used to like the Ronto wraps, but now, I don't know, they taste off to me. And all the food at the docking bay, it's just not my thing. I'm not a fan of Galaxy's Edge's food, so it ranks 8 out of 8. bottom of the barrel. But in terms of theming, you gotta give it number one. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is the most modern, it's the most innovative theme park land at Disneyland Park. It is really impressive the amount of detail in this land, and unlike Adventureland, this place is absolutely huge. Like, there's just so much going on. I know a lot of people do criticize the walkway from Hungry Bear Restaurant to the marketplace in Galaxy's Edge. Like, that whole walkway in front of Rise of the Resistance is pretty empty. That's also kind of the vibe that they were going for. Like, the Resistance has an outpost beyond city limits, and of course inside the city, the First Order has a presence with the TIE Fighter with Kylo Ren walking around, and the Stormtroopers. And then of course you have the Millennium Falcon, which is absolutely the centerpiece for the land. It's not the most visually impressive thing, but it's still an iconic set piece of like film history. So it is really cool to see it in real life. And a lot of those mountains like absolutely tower over the land. Like, the backside of the land is basically both the show buildings for Rise of the Resistance and Smuggler's Run. So it is really cool that they're disguised really well. And it looks like an absolutely massive mountain range. If I do have to give a nitpick about it, the fact that the parking structure is right behind Galaxy's Edge is kind of a downside, because you see, the first thing you see when you arrive at Disneyland is how fake Star Wars Land is. But when you're actually in the park, or if you park in Toy Story, you'll never know. You know, it's really cool. It's very well done. I will say that I was disappointed with the lack of kinetic energy in Galaxy's Edge. Like, there's just not much going on. Like, both of the attractions are indoors, obviously, so there's not really much motion. There's only one waterfall, and that's in line for Rise of the Resistance, so I do wish that they had a better use of water throughout the entire land. And out of the lands at Disneyland Park, Galaxy's Edge is absolutely the one that is the most character driven. Like, as I said, they have the Stormtroopers and Kylo Ren walking around all the time. You can find Rey, Boba Fett, the Mandalorian. They just have a bunch of characters cycling around. They do have like side stories if you want to take time to uncover them. Like, they used to have a rebel spy character like going around. One time I went with one of my buddies who's like a total Star Wars fan, and we played the card game from Solo with a bunch of the cast members, and that was pretty fun. So like, there is this other layer to Galaxy's Edge, but most people aren't gonna take the time to go find it. I was never really that interested by it. Like, if you can't tell from my channel, I'm absolutely an attractions person. I'm a roller coasters, dark rides, water rides, any type of ride. I want to talk about it. I want to ride it. When I'm at a theme park, I want to ride the rides. You know, that's priority number one for me. All of the other cool stuff about theme parks is just kind of a bonus, but I'm at a theme park to ride the rides. Even as a local to Galaxy's Edge, like, I don't spend that much time messing around with the story or the app that they have. Like, they have a bunch of QR codes around the land, and you can like scan them and play a little game, but that never really interested me. Like, the interesting thing about theme parks is being in the theme park. You know, I don't want to spend my time in the theme park on my phone, because, you know, when I'm at home, I spend way too much time on my phone anyway, you know? I'm trying to escape that reality. I'm trying to have fun in a different environment. So I'm not a fan of how Galaxy's Edge leaned into that. I'm also not the biggest fan of character-driven experiences. Like, I recognize the importance of it and the history that it has within Disneyland. But I feel like other lands use characters as like a supporting thing. But at Galaxy's Edge, it feels like it relies on character interactions to tell the story of the land, which is cool on paper, but in practice, it feels like it's missing other elements. Like, you walk around Fantasyland and you understand the story of the land, you know? You don't have to see a character, you know? Like, without the characters in Galaxy's Edge, if you walk around at night, like close to closing time, it's just kind of dead. There's a significant lack of energy. So for that reason, the atmosphere is nowhere near as impressive as the theming. I ranked theming first in the entire park, and I ranked the atmosphere 6 out of 8. When Galaxy's Edge first opened, I was really disappointed, like, I'm not gonna lie. And I know there was a huge backlash when Galaxy's Edge opened, because Star Wars fans are high-key toxic, like, if you didn't know. So everyone was taking shots at Galaxy's Edge for being a total failure, even though Disney put a bunch of capacity restrictions on themselves, because everyone and their mom thought Galaxy's Edge was gonna be insanely crowded when it first opened, because it was so hyped up for such a long time. But because they blocked out all the pass holders for like all summer after they had like their opening reservation system where pass holders got to see the land for the first time and then they kicked them out for the rest of the summer. It was pretty empty, and I feel like part of that is also because everyone thought it was going to be packed, so no one wanted to go. But that was completely blown out of proportion in my opinion. Like if you go to Galaxy's Edge now, like years after this whole controversy died down and blew over, it is one of the busier lands of the park, and of course Rise of the Resistance pulls a massive wait time. It's always Rise of the Resistance or Space Mountain that is usually the longest line in the park. When Haunted Mansion Holiday first opens, usually that, another contender for longest line in the park, but 9 times out of 10, Rise of the Resistance has the longest line by far, which completely makes sense. Rise of the Resistance is incredible. I kind of glossed over it, but when Rise first opened, my opinion of Galaxy's Edge like shot through the roof. Like the ride is that good that it makes me love Galaxy's Edge even more than I did. So that disappointment washed away as soon as I got to experience one of the greatest theme park rides of all time. I could totally gush about Rise of the Resistance for the longest time, and there's a lot of things to talk about with Galaxy's Edge, so just like Tomorrowland, I'm planning a Galaxy's Edge review at some point. This is definitely one of the most interesting lands at Disneyland Park, but it is not my personal favorite, because number 1 is New Orleans Square. I love New Orleans Square. It's hard to put into words. So for headlining attractions, we have Pirates of the Caribbean, and of course the Haunted Mansion, so that means you have 0 supporting attractions, which means it is tied for last with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. For food, I ranked it number 1. We're gonna dig into this in a second. Theming is second. The detail in New Orleans Square is absolutely insane. The streets of New Orleans Square, you can totally get lost in there for just an insane amount of time. There's so many shops and different corners. Haunted Mansion has the best outdoor queue in the entire park, and of course a vast majority of the rivers of America lines up with New Orleans Square. So just that energy, you have that river traffic constantly flowing. You have an awesome area loop from the musical perspective. You have Jack Sparrow and Princess Tiana walking around all the time. During the holiday season, you'll have Jack Skellington and Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas. And of course, Haunted Mansion Holiday, which is one of my favorite things ever. I love the Haunted Mansion, both classic and holiday. That's my favorite attraction in the park, so it absolutely boosts up New Orleans Square. Pirates is amazing as well, but I'm absolutely a Haunted Mansion person instead of a Pirates of the Caribbean person, but I know there's a bunch of people who are Pirates people. But these two rides are just absolutely incredible. The food at Tiana's Palace is really, really well done. I absolutely love it. I was really sad when they closed the French Market because the French Market was my favorite restaurant at the Disneyland Resort. So I was like completely bitter about it. But when Tiana's Palace opened, it's like just as good. And of course we have the Royal Street Veranda. You have Cafe Orleans. And you have the Harbor Galley restaurant across from the Haunted Mansion. So you have bread bowls with clam chowder. You have gumbo. There's like anything you could ever want. It's by far my favorite theme park food. Most of the time when I'm eating at Disneyland, I'm eating in New Orleans Square. You also have mint juleps in the mint julep bar. Of course, beignets are another famous snack at Disneyland. So I love the beignets. Mint juleps are one of my favorite things to get at Disney. And at Cafe Orleans, which is like a sit-down restaurant, they have unlimited refills of mint juleps. You also have the Blue Bayou restaurant like inside the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which is absolutely crazy. The atmosphere is so lovely. Like I just love spending time in there. I've had the opportunity to eat at the Blue Bayou a couple of times, and both times I walk away just completely happy. Like that's absolutely a special occasion spot. It's like impossible to get reservations there because it's just so wonderful. So if you couldn't tell, the atmosphere ranking for New Orleans Square is 1 and theming is 2, just behind Galaxy's Edge. In terms of firework view along the rivers of America, they have like a projection show. They use the Phantasmic fountains, so firework view gets 3 out of 8. This is one of the main areas to watch the fireworks. It's just absolutely incredible. And of course, I just completely glossed over Phantasmic, which is one of my favorite things ever. And although technically it takes place in Frontierland, I credit Phantasmic as part of New Orleans Square because all of the viewing areas are right in front of New Orleans Square. They're literally in front of Pirates of the Caribbean and the Haunted Mansion. And I love Phantasmic, dude. Phantasmic is incredible. Like, it's just an emotional experience for any Disney fan. The music is spectacular. It's just an incredible spectacle. It's hard to put into words how much I love New Orleans Square. This has been my favorite land for the longest time, and when Galaxy's Edge opened, I thought it would be enough to overtake it, but years later, after I've had more and more experience at both lands, I still think New Orleans Square is the best land at Disneyland Park. It literally is Walt Disney's masterpiece. Like, this is the last land that he had a hand in before he passed, and in my opinion, it is the best. So before we wrap up, we're gonna look at the categories that I talked about and just rank everything up, because I know it's hard to keep track of all the rankings while I'm going through all the different categories. So in terms of headlining attractions, number 1 was New Orleans Square with the Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean. Number 2 was Star Wars Galaxy's Edge with Rise of the Resistance and Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. Number 3 was Tomorrowland with Space Mountain and Star Tours. Number 4 is Fantasyland with Matterhorn bobsleds. 5 was Toontown with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. 6 was Adventureland with Indiana Jones Adventure. 7 is Frontierland with Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. And 8 is Bayou Country with Tiana's Bayou Adventure. For supporting attractions, number 1 is Tomorrowland with Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, Astro Orbiter, Autopia, Nemo, and the Monorail. Number 2 is Fantasyland with Pinocchio's Daring Journey, Snow White's Enchanted Wish, King Arthur Carousel, Casey Jr. Circus Train, Dumbo the Flying Elephant, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, Peter Pan's Flight, The Mad Tea Party, Alice in Wonderland, Storybook Land Canal Boats, and It's a Small World. Number 3 is Adventureland with The Jungle Cruise. Number 4 is Bayou Country with The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and Davy Crockett Explorer Canoes. Number 5 is Toontown with Chip 'n Dale's Gadget Coaster and Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin. Number 6 is Frontierland with the Mark Twain and the Sailing Ship Columbia. And then tied for last place is Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and New Orleans Square with none. In terms of lands with the best theming, number 1 is Galaxy's Edge, 2 is New Orleans Square, 3 is Adventureland, 4 Frontierland, 5 is Toontown, 6 is Fantasyland, 7 is Bayou Country, and 8 is Tomorrowland. In terms of best atmosphere, number 1 is New Orleans Square, 2 is Adventureland, 3 is Frontierland, 4 is Toontown, 5 is Fantasyland, 6 is Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, 7 is Bayou Country, and 8 is Tomorrowland. In terms of food, number 1, New Orleans Square, 2, Adventureland, 3, Frontierland, 4, Bayou Country, 5, Tomorrowland, 6 is Toontown, 7 is Fantasyland, and 8 is Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. And lastly, the little bonus category that we had was the best firework view. 1 is Fantasyland, 2 is Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, 3 is New Orleans Square, 4 is Bayou Country, 5 Frontierland, 6 Tomorrowland, 7 Adventureland, and 8 is Toontown. So that is my complete ranking of the lands of Disneyland. Please let me know if you agree with anything or everything in this video. Please let me know what you disagree with. How do you rank the lands of Disneyland? What categories are the most important to you? Because if you can't tell, the most important category to me is headlining attractions, and then probably atmosphere and theming would be second and third. Supporting attractions aren't the biggest deal to me, because if we look at my favorite lands, which are New Orleans Square and Galaxy's Edge, they both have 2 awesome headlining attractions and 0 supporting attractions, and in my opinion, that's not that big of a deal. But I'd be interested to know if it is a big deal to you. So I'd love to have a discussion going in the comment section down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you later.